In 330 BC, the most powerful army on Earth broke through the gates of the richest city on Earth. They expected resistance. They found something worse: 5,200 metric tons of gold and silver, stacked floor to ceiling in vaults that had been filling for 200 years. It took 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels just to carry it away. Alexander burned that city, and within a year he was wearing Persian robes, speaking Persian words, marrying Persian women. The gold left Persepolis on the backs of animals, but the civilization that minted it consumed the man who stole it. This pattern has repeated for 5,000 years. Every conqueror who marched onto the Iranian plateau came for the treasure. None of them left unchanged. This is Wealth of Empires. Most histories of Iran begin with an invasion, the Greeks marching east, the Arabs riding south, the Mongols descending from the steppe. But that is the story of what happened to Iran. It is not the story of what Iran is. To understand this place, you have to go deeper. Past the empires, past the conquests, past every army that thought it had won, you have to reach the layer underneath, the one that absorbed them all, because Iran did not survive 5,000 years of conquest by fighting back. It survived by being more sophisticated, more literate, more economically advanced than anyone who held the sword. This is a civilization that invented international currency, built the first postal system, and ran a tax bureaucracy so efficient that every empire that conquered it kept the Persian accountants. The plateau endured. The administrators endured. The language endured. The only thing that ever changed was the name on the throne. Western textbooks begin civilization in Mesopotamia or Egypt. They are missing a chapter. In southeastern Iran, a flood in 2001 washed open a buried necropolis along the Halil River. The Jiroft culture, a Bronze Age urban center the world had not known existed. Monumental mounds rising 21 meters, carved vessels depicting figures wrestling serpents and eagles. 300 kilometers north, the ziggurat at Tepe Sialk was built from over 1 million mud bricks around 1900 BC. That is roughly 800 years older than the famous ziggurat of Ur. In the southwest of the ancient city of Susa, the Elamites developed one of the oldest writing systems on Earth, Proto-Elamite script. 4,000 years later, no one has cracked it. But what we do know is this. In the 23rd century BC, Elam and the Akkadian Empire signed what historians recognize as the first international treaty in recorded history. Formal diplomacy was invented on Iranian soil. Sometime between the 20th and 15th centuries BC, nomadic tribes from the Central Asian steppe descended onto this plateau. They called themselves Aryans, the noble ones. They named their homeland Aryan Mvaja, the land of the Aryans. That word, over centuries, became Iran. They split into rival confederations, Medes in the northwest, Persians in the south. But before they built a single empire, they forged something far more powerful than any army. An idea, Zoroastrianism, the first major religion to declare that time does not move in a circle. The universe had a beginning, a creation. It was driving toward a final battle between Ahura Mazda, the god of light and truth, and Angra Mainyu, the spirit of absolute darkness, and at the end, a resurrection, a judgment, the world purified by fire. When Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon in 593-90 BC and freed the Jewish exiles, 2 centuries of close cultural contact began. Jewish thinkers absorbed the Zoroastrian framework wholesale: heaven and hell, angels and demons, a Messiah, a last judgment. Those ideas passed directly into Christianity, then into Islam. The coordinates of time every human being lives inside today, linear with a beginning and an end, were first mapped on the Iranian plateau. And one smaller gift, the English word paradise comes from Old Persian paradisa, a walled garden. An Iranian word for a royal enclosure became humanity's name for heaven. In 550 BC, a man named Cyrus united the Medes and the Persians and built the Achaemenid Empire, the first superpower in history. What set Cyrus apart was simple economics. He did not destroy conquered cities. He did not enslave populations. He understood something radical for the ancient world. A functioning economy generates more wealth than a looted one. His successor, Darius I, turned that insight into a machine. 20 satrapies, each assessed a precise tribute. Babylon owed 1,000 talents of silver per year. Egypt paid 700 talents plus 120,000 measures of grain. India, the richest province, delivered 8.3 metric tons of gold dust annually. 32% of total imperial revenue from a single satrapy. The entire system pulled in the equivalent of 376 metric tons of silver every year. Then Darius minted the daric, 8.4 grams of gold at 96% purity, the first standardized international currency. Hoards have been found from Sicily to Afghanistan. The Greeks called them archers, after the kneeling king with a bow stamped on every coin. And Darius connected this empire with the royal road. 2,700 kilometers from Sardis to Susa, 111 relay stations. Mounted couriers covered the full distance in 7 days. Ordinary travelers took 3 months. The state postal service that ran those relays was so reliable that Herodotus wrote one sentence about it. 2,400 years later, that sentence was carved above the entrance to the New York City post office. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor darkness of night prevents them from accomplishing their appointed rounds. Persepolis itself was not a capital, it was a ceremonial complex, activated each spring for Nowruz. Its staircase reliefs show tribute bearers from 23 nations, Susians leading a lioness and her cubs, Armenians carrying wine, each one led by the hand by a Persian courtier, not dragged in chains, led by the hand. We tell the story of the Greco-Persian Wars as a triumph of the West. 300 Spartans holding the pass. The reality is less flattering. For the Achaemenid Empire, losing a few Greek border towns was an inconvenience. So the Persians changed strategy. They funded Athens against Sparta, then Sparta against Athens. For decades, they played the city-states against each other, until in 387 BC, the exhausted Greeks signed a peace treaty dictated entirely by the Persian king. Every Greek city in Asia Minor returned to the empire. Not a single Persian soldier crossed the Aegean. The Spartan king Agesilaus, watching this unfold, said he had been driven out of Asia by 10,000 archers. He did not mean bowmen, he meant darics. What the largest army in the ancient world failed to take by force, Persian gold purchased without a single casualty. Alexander the Great finally shattered the Achaemenid Empire in 330 BC and burned Persepolis. Possibly drunk, Plutarch records that an Athenian courtesan named Thais hurled the first torch during a banquet. Alexander reportedly regretted it afterward. But here is the part the Western version always leaves out. Within months, Alexander began wearing Persian royal robes. He adopted Persian court ritual and demanded proskynesis, prostration, from his own Greek officers. The philosopher Callisthenes refused. Callisthenes died for it. At the mass wedding at Susa, Alexander married 2 Achaemenid princesses simultaneously, while 80 of his commanders married Persian noblewomen. The man who burned Persepolis became Persian. And this was not an exception. This was the pattern. Iran's most devastating weapon was never on any battlefield. It was the civilization itself, so deep, so layered, that anyone who stayed long enough was consumed by it. The Parthians who followed proved this pattern for 5 centuries, and in 53 BC, they handed Rome the most humiliating defeat in its history. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, the man who crushed the Spartacus revolt. He invaded Parthia with 42,000 troops at the age of 62, desperate for the one thing his fortune could not buy, military glory. Opposing him was Serena, head of one of Parthia's 7 great noble houses. He was not yet 30. Serena brought 10,000 cavalry and one innovation that decided everything. 1,000 camels loaded with spare arrows. The Romans had counted on the Parthians running out of ammunition. They never did. The horse archers circled the Roman squares for hours, perfecting the maneuver that enters the English language as the Parthian shot, riding away, then twisting in the saddle to fire backward. 20,000 Romans killed, 10,000 captured. Crassus himself was cut down during a failed parley. According to Cassius Dio, the Parthians poured molten gold into his mouth. "You thirsted for wealth," they told the richest man in Rome. "Now drink." His severed head was delivered to the Parthian king at a wedding feast, where it was used as a stage prop in a live performance of Euripides. 2 centuries later, the Sassanid Shah Shapur captured Emperor Valerian at Edessa, the only Roman emperor in history taken alive by a foreign power. Roman prisoners of war built the Bandi Caesar, Caesar's Dam, near the city of Shushtar. 1400 years later, it still stands. And at Naksh-e-Rustam, Shapur carved the scene into a cliff face, the Roman emperor kneeling before him. That is still there too. The Sassanids held the choke point between Rome and China for 400 years. Their silver coins have turned up from Sweden to the coast of Guangdong. When the Byzantine emperor tried to bypass Persia by sending Ethiopian traders to buy silk directly from Indian ports, the plan failed. Persian merchants had already bought every cargo at the source. But the Sassanids built something more durable than any trade monopoly. The Academy of Gondishapur, part university, part teaching hospital, part library, synthesizing Persian, Greek, Indian, and Syriac knowledge under one roof.
Welcome to Gondishapur.
When Justinian closed the Academy of Athens in 529, the banished Greek philosophers fled east. They landed at Gondishapur. 3 centuries later, the Abbasid Caliph al-Mamun founded Baghdad's House of Wisdom, modeled directly on Gondishapur, staffed by its graduates. The most important bridge between the ancient world and the Islamic Golden Age was an Iranian institution. From this tradition came Avicenna, whose canon of medicine was the standard European textbook for 600 years. Omar Khayyam, who calculated the length of the year so precisely that his calendar is still more accurate than the Gregorian by a margin of 17 centuries. And the Sassanids gave the world chess. Shah became check. Shah mat, the king is helpless, became checkmate. In 651, the Arab Caliphate conquered Iran. Islam arrived. Zoroastrianism, which had defined Iranian identity for over a millennium, began to recede. For any other culture, this would have been the end. Egypt was permanently Arabized. Syria was Arabized. Mesopotamia was Arabized. But the Persians did it again. The Caliphate discovered it could not govern without Persian expertise. The Barmakid family, originally Buddhist priests from the city of Balkh, converted to Islam, rose through Abbasid ranks, and effectively administered the empire for 17 years. The Persian language did not die, it flourished. And then a poet named Ferdowsi spent 35 years writing 50,000 rhyming couplets, deliberately keeping Arabic vocabulary to 9%. The Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, 3 times the length of the Iliad, the longest epic poem by a single author in history. It preserved the Persian language at the exact moment it was most endangered. A leading Egyptian historian asked why Egypt speaks Arabic today, while Iran still speaks Farsi, reportedly answered, because we had no Ferdowsi. Then the Mongols came. Beginning in 122, the armies of Genghis Khan did not merely conquer, they annihilated. But the deepest wound was not the killing, it was economic. The Mongols systematically destroyed Iran's Qanat systems. Underground aqueducts carved through bedrock, some stretching 80 kilometers, that had kept this arid land alive for 2,000 years. They converted farmland to horse pasture. Iran's population would not recover for 6 centuries. At Baghdad in 1938, the Mongols ended the Abbasid Caliphate and threw the contents of the House of Wisdom into the Tigris. Chroniclers wrote the river ran black with ink. And yet, within 70 years, Genghis Khan's grandson Ghazan Khan converted to Islam. 100,000 Mongols followed. The language of the new Mongol state became Persian. Again, in 1501, Shah Ismail declared Twelver Shia Islam the state religion, permanently separating Iran from its Sunni neighbors and forging a national identity that persists to this day. Under Shah Abbas I, Isfahan grew to 500,000 people, rivaling London. The French jeweler Chardin, who spent a decade there, counted 162 mosques, 48 schools, and 1,800 caravansaries. He called Naqsh-e-Jahan Square the most beautiful in the world. Stone goalposts for polo matches still stand at both ends. Abbas relocated 150,000 Armenian Christians to Isfahan and gave them a monopoly on Persian silk. The network they built traded simultaneously in every major empire on earth, from Amsterdam to Manila. Silk was the oil of the 17th century. and Iran controlled the supply. Two centuries later, Nader Shah invaded Mughal India and sacked Delhi for 58 days. He returned with so much plundered wealth, the peacock throne, the Koh-i-Noor diamond, that he suspended all Iranian taxes for 3 years. But by the 19th century, the Qajar dynasty had bled the country dry. Russia took Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Then in 1908, British prospectors struck oil at Masjid-i-Suleiman. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company was born, later renamed British Petroleum. Churchill converted the Royal Navy from coal to Iranian oil on the eve of the First World War. The civilization that once commanded the Silk Road now sat on something the modern world desperately needed and had lost the power to decide who took it. In 1935, Reza Shah Pahlavi sent a directive to every foreign embassy on earth. The country the West had called Persia for 25 centuries would be addressed by its true name, the name its people had used for 3,000 years, Iran, the land of the Aryans. It was not a whim, it was a declaration. We are not your exotic colony. We are an ancient civilization, and you will address us on our terms. Then came 1953, when British and American intelligence overthrew Iran's elected prime minister to protect oil interests. Then 1979, when decades of accumulated pressure detonated in revolution, the monarchy fell. Iran became a theocratic republic, and the world's understanding of this place narrowed to a single hostile frame. Here is the pattern, and it has held for 5,000 years. Every army that marched onto this plateau came for the gold. The Macedonians came, the Arabs came, the Mongols came. They all took the vaults, and then they stayed. And the plateau took them. The wealth of Iran was never in its treasuries. It was in what happened to anyone who tried to spend it. Somewhere on that plateau tonight, a language older than Latin is still being spoken. A calendar more accurate than yours is still keeping time. And a word invented in a Persian garden is still what every civilization on earth calls heaven. Iran does not need you to understand it. It has outlasted everyone who tried.